Welcome to Amazing Grace. This show is dedicated to the idea that active, informed older adults are an essential part of today's society. We provide information regarding senior issues and concerns and salute individuals or groups who demonstrate that productivity doesn't end at retirement.
Hi there, welcome to this segment of Amazing Grace. My name is Ed Whitbread, and we are privileged this morning to have with us the Poet Laureate of Erie County, Chuck Joy.
Go ahead.
Quite frankly, more than Poet Laureate, you are Mr. Poet in Erie County for some period of time now.
Right now.
It's kind of surprising how active the poetry scene is in Erie. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's something that I can tell you is happening with the perspective of somebody who hosts a poetry event every week on Tuesdays at Calamari's, and it's been well attended. We've had poetry every week in Erie for a long time. Plus, there are other activities of poetry. The Art Museum is having an open mic on an irregular basis. Cafe 710 is having poetry. Every once in a while there's an event at Ember and Forge. There's another, I think, slam poetry event coming to the surface, and lots of activity at the colleges.
Okay, tell us a little bit about being a Poet Laureate. Define it for us.
Well, I think I'm personifying the art, Ed.
Okay.
And in Erie, besides personifying the art, I also administer a project. Being selected Poet Laureate in Erie involves the system, or the judging system, including judgment on a project proposal. And this is my second term, so I'm in the middle of producing or co-producing my second year of projects.
Is this a lifetime appointment, or is this year to
No, 1
year,
year at a time.
or 1 year at a time, but you can be rechosen each year?
There's an option to request a second year and perhaps even a third, although no one's ever done that, and I don't intend to either.
Let's talk about your project, because it's garnered a little publicity here in the last so often, and this is the Spoon River Anthology.
Yeah, well, the most recent activity was a staged reading of selected poems from Spoon River Anthology by Edgar Lee Masters that occurred at the Hurd Auditorium at the Blasco Bayfront Library in January. And Cable Access and Media made a terrific video of this show, which was very exciting and successful in spite of a terrific blast of winter weather, rare for this year, but nonetheless we had it. The cast showed up in robust numbers, and the video, you can't tell that it's snowing outside, and it's a wonderful video. The concept of Spoon River carries us a long way.
Okay, let me back up. If I stop the average person on the street and talk poetry, they start talking in summer, 7th grade and accessible. One of your talents is making poetry accessible. And I think part of it is that you almost need to hear it sometimes, as opposed to simply reading it on a page. So I'm going to ask you to read something
I accept.
from that you have written. And I think the one that we talked about was Every Day a Poem.
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to read this. It's from a collection called Dreamville. Every day a poem. Every day a poem. The many minutes arranged into as pleasing a composition as can be. The opening, borrowing from everything has ever gone before. Every character present from the first beat. Especially the narrator, a voice at least, an enveloping intelligence, one particular consciousness, the limits of a universe, complete with distant galaxies, bubbling contentedly away, vast tracts of black space, tiny spaceships, all this resisting meaning. Closer to home, weather systems, television, good intentions, bad decisions, stage directions, plot twists, right up to the minute. And the music, God of energy, thank you. Thank you for the rhythm swinging, syllables like drumsticks or a wedding ring against the steering wheel. A kind of soundtrack, however brilliant or exhausted, gray music like rain except words, the cryptic melody of letters. Thank you.
How long would you work on something like that? That's a compression of thoughts in a lifetime and impressions. How difficult is it to do that? Does that come to you, just flow out, or do you sweat bullets over it?
Well, I think the idea is to catch the flow. And so I'm the type of poet who likes to get it down pretty much the first time. Not always in one particular session, but at least kind of transcribing what's going on interiorly to the page. And that happens pretty much in real time.
You trust your instinct that you're getting it right the first time.
Well, I get it down the first time, and then it's 2020. The editing process includes typing it up into a computer, and that's an editing opportunity. But the bulk of it, the discipline or the art is to get the bulk of it sort of down. Not everybody is, I'm just telling you how I do it, and others more or less experience that flow. Flow is a big deal.
Okay, let's go back to Spoon River.
Sure.
And tell our audience what Spoon River is to begin with. I mean, it's not something that is universally known.
Yeah, well, it's well known though, because
it is
was
well
first
known.
published.
It is traditional.
This is an edition of it here, with some extraneous papers of great import. This is one edition of it, and I spent a lot of time with this particular book. In one sense, Spoon River is a movie, and it's a movie that's going to play premiere screening at the Hurd Auditorium at the Blasco Bayfront Library, I like to call it, on April 5th at 2 o'clock. Free admission, all are welcome, and the video is terrific, and it captures performances by the cast of dozens, literally, including myself, Sean Clerkin, Abdullah Bigwash Washington, Greg Brown, Joe Schember, Kathy Dahlkemper, Angela McNair, Mabel Howard. There's a lot of people involved in this, and it's a wonderful
Explain the structure
video.
of the book.
Yes. Spoon River Anthology is a collection of about 230 poems, each one titled in the name of and written in the voice of a different fictional character who lies at perpetual rest in a cemetery in Illinois.
That's a mammoth undertaking.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
When you go back and think about it. How did you choose? Obviously, if you had read the whole book down at the library, you might still be there.
No, it reads very quickly, but it took us several sessions. I read most of it in the hot summer in my backyard this last summer. I first encountered Spoon River Anthology as a high school student at Cathedral Prep, right down the street. And I remembered it fondly over many years. But this last summer, because I'd been spending more time in the library, I got in the habit of taking books out of the library and kind of following my instincts through that terrific collection. And one of them was Spoon River, and I started to read it, and not only was I fond of it, it took me away. I loved it. It was great. And so at the time I was looking for a project, so I melded it into my project proposal.
How did you decide which of the multitude of choices you had to actually put in your program?
Well, it was a process of involving the readers and then kind of choosing the poems. Sometimes so it was kind of an interaction between who was reading and what poems to do. Some of the readers wanted to read certain poems and were chosen specifically, such as Mark Borzon or Mary Jane Kidd or Robin Dial Cuneo. Some of them didn't make it because of the weather, but most everybody did. Some wanted to read their own poems. Others, they were just happy to have me assign one, so I had the opportunity to think about what might work for them. Like Kathy Dahlkamper read one that I asked her to read, and Joe did too.
Why don't you read us one or two of your favorites from Spoon
Sure,
River?
I would love to.
Again, to hear poetry as well as read it.
Yeah, although reading it on the page in your own voice in the silence of your mind is hard to beat. Oh, you know what I did? I pulled those papers out where I had my poem ready to go, but Spoon River Anthology has a table of contents, which is helpful if it can remember the last name of the person. But I think I'm getting it. Hang on a second. Yeah, Franklin Jones on page 92. Titled in the name of and written in the voice of the fictional character who's laying at perpetual rest. This is Franklin Jones. If I could have lived another year, I could have finished my flying machine and become rich and famous. Hence, it is fitting the workman who tried to chisel a dove for me made it look more like a chicken. For what is it all but being hatched and running about the yard to the day of the block? Save that a man has an angel's brain and sees the axe from the first. There you go. Thank you. So,
anything else you'd like to?
Yeah, I would. I spent a lot of time with this book, and I found myself, and I encourage you and all your viewers to consider this. If you spend time with Spoon River, you might be inspired to write poems in the context style of Edgar Lee Masters. Here's one of mine called Kurt Salmon. I wrote some poems, one about crumbs. If I had any crumbs right this minute, I'd scatter some. Ran a coffee shop on North Park Row, a glittering nightclub uptown years later, a businessman, a producer. Mostly, I was music, voices, and humor, studio skills, but mostly music. One day, we were at Bobby's place, far from the River Spoon, me and Rick Tift. The one time we sang together, let me be your countryman. Thank you.
That works on so many levels because Kurt was very involved in what we're doing here today. He was involved in so many things.
Yes,
and
he
it
was.
brings back memories. We've got about a minute. Would you care to tell us about your next project?
Well,
are you ready to talk about
Well,
it?
April 5th will be the screening of the film Spoon River Anthology Selected Poems, featuring 23 Erie readers at the library. Free admission, all are welcome. April 20th at the library, that's a Monday at 7 o'clock, I'll be presenting the annual reading. On the Poet Laureate side, what's required of the Poet Laureate is an annual presentation of their original poetry. And I'll be doing that for the second time at the library on April 20th.
Chuck, it is such a pleasure. Come
Thanks,
back
Ed.
anytime.
Appreciate it.
Hi there. Welcome to this segment of Amazing Grays. My name is Ed Whitbread. And with us this morning is a young man who was almost born into the position that he holds. Steve Weiser, you're the executive director of the Erie Philharmonic.
Indeed.
Let's start with that comment I just made. How were you born into this thing?
So pretty much every aspect of my family involves music. I have an older brother who was a French horn player and then works for Kerr's Viola Keyboard Company. And then both of my parents were heavily involved in music in the Reading, Philadelphia area. So my mom was in the Reading Symphony for 55 years as a second flute. My dad was trombone in the orchestra and then became executive director. And then I was timpanist. So at any given point in time, you could have one concert with 3 Weiser family members on stage, which probably breaks some rules somewhere. But it had always been a part of my life from a very early on.
Then you were with The Erie concert?
The Erie Chamber Orchestra.
Erie Chamber Orchestra.
Exactly. So that's what originally brought me to Erie from Philadelphia, was to fill in at the passing of Bruce Morton Wright. They split his position up into a music director, who was Matthew Kramer, and then myself as the general manager. So I worked at Gannon, sort of learning every aspect of how to run an orchestra. It was a one-man show, much like Bruce had done, but they split it up into two people. So it kept me busy.
And how long have you been in your current position?
So this is now my 5th season here with the Erie
time
Philharmonic.
flies.
Exactly. So 2015 was when I went to the Erie Phil.
Now, I would like you to take 2 or 3 minutes and simply brag. It's been a pretty good run the last 4 or 5 years with.
It really has. There's a lot of things have caught fire for us. When we started in 2015, there was an entire staff turnover, which is sometimes the best thing to happen to a group that was 100 years old, because it wasn't.
The staff was 100
Exactly, right, it was close, exactly. But it wasn't us relying on what we've done in the past. It was us looking to the future, because we had to pretty much start everything from scratch. So we had new board leadership, a whole new staff, and we sort of came in with the mantra that just because we don't have the budget the size of the Philly Orchestra or the Cleveland Orchestra doesn't mean we shouldn't look and act like an orchestra that size. So we started looking at upgrading our branding and our marketing and our programming, and then really digging into the 3 tenets of our mission statement, which are enrich, entertain, and educate. And we wanted to make sure that we were doing all of those things. So we did more aggressive programming. We started doing more things in the schools with outreach visits, and it turned into what is already to date 18 sold-out concerts since December of 2016.
One thing I've always kind of wondered about is your interaction. You're kind of administrative. You're dealing with a board in one direction. What's your interaction with Daniel Meyer and all those people sitting in front of him?
So Daniel and I have a beautiful relationship because we get to program a lot of what you see on the stage at the Erie Phil, at the Warner Theater. Daniel will have a lot of the ideas of the bigger pieces he wants to work with and the soloists that he wants to work with, and then I'll help with picking our movie concerts and some of the pops aspects of things that we try to do. And then I'll reach out to the home run level soloists like your Emmanuel Axe or your Midoris to try to bring them to Erie as well. So we really program the season together. And then being someone that had played on stage with Daniel and in the percussion section of the Erie Phil, I have a very good relationship with those musicians because for 3 years, I was in the trenches with them. I know what it's like to play on that stage. I know how badly we need the renovations that are coming up. I know what it's like to only see 800 people in the audience versus 2,000. And that's a feeling that drives us every day, is I never want a musician to play to an empty house, ever.
Brag a little bit about just what that 2,000, what your numbers have been the last few years.
So I would say on average, we're reaching around 1,800 people when you combine our symphonic with our pops. And then every time we have a pops concert that sells out, it's around 2,100 people. So we had our first symphonic series sellout back in 2017, which we hadn't had for 20 years. So the fact that we could sell out a symphonic series concert in Erie is fabulous. We did it again this past January. We sold out a concert, and coming up in April, ideally that'll be a sold out concert as well. So that's something we haven't ever seen here before.
You've actually traveled to Meadville a couple of times, haven't you?
Exactly.
How did that come about?
So when I was still playing as a percussionist, the Christmas concert would always take place as a run out, is what we call, where we do one concert on Saturday in Erie and then Sunday we do it again. We started doing the Christmas concert in Meadville, and now over the past couple of years, we've added a concert at Allegheny College, which is, again, it's a free concert for the community. So we'll do it up here for the Warner Theater audience, and then a Sunday afternoon, we'll do a repeat of one of the concerts down there.
Now, as we're sitting here, we're coming into the tail end of your current season, but hopefully we'll get this on before the last concert, which is a pretty big deal.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that.
So if you're going to put on a concert that is the final show before renovations that have taken 20 years, you have to go out with a bang. And Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, there's no bigger way to do it. With a chorus of 150 people, a huge orchestra, a Grammy winner as a baritone soloist, Mark Stephen Doss, you really have to pull out all the stops. And that's what we have planned. It's sort of your grand season finale and almost the end of an era in the current Warner Theater as we know it today.
How how are you going to get all those people on that stage? Just out of curiosity, it's not a large stage.
It's not, and if anyone's seen the Warner, it's not a deep stage, it's a very long stage, which is as unhelpful as you could possibly imagine. So the only thing that helps is there's not a lot of percussion on the Beethoven, which means we have more stage space. But still, when you put about 150 singers on stage, there will be no free inch of space between the singers, the musicians, Daniel, and the front of the stage.
We have a little time to spare. Talk about dealing with soloists and touring. Somebody comes to town either for a pop concert or to headline a symphonic concert. Give us a story.
So a lot of times...
One of the ones you can tell.
Right, exactly. So the best one we have is from this March, we brought in a soloist that arrived on Tuesday, and we pretty much beat that soloist up for 4 straight days of outreach events, where we took her into elementary schools, middle schools. She did a master class where trumpet players from local universities perform for her, and she gives them advice. We did a lecture at the Jefferson Society. We did a live show on QLN, plus an open rehearsal and a concert. So over the course of 1 week, the concert's on Saturday, but that guest artist arrived on Tuesday and did 7 events across the community before she ever took the stage with us on Saturday night.
That happen very often?
For all of our symphonic concerts, the guests always come in early, and we always at least arrange 1 to 2 outreach visits. So you can guarantee that if there's a concert on Saturday, that artist on Friday morning was in an elementary school somewhere performing for students. Whether it's in Erie School District, Walnut Creek, Mill Creek, anywhere that we can get an artist in, we will always do that.
What we haven't talked about are tickets. Let's flog some tickets for a couple of minutes here. I assume you want to sell some seats.
Exactly. So, I mean, the best one is the April 4th performance of Beethoven 9 is definitely something you don't want to miss.
And it's going to sell out.
And it will sell out. Tickets are already selling very fast, so there are not a lot left. So I would recommend doing it very quickly. But again, it's your last chance to see that Warner stage as it exists now. When we come back from renovations, the stage will be deeper. There will be a brand new acoustical shell on stage. So it's all going to be different. That's sort of the sending off of an era that I know began 2 decades ago with the starting of the renovations. And we can't wait to finally end it. So Beethoven 9, Grammy winner, it's definitely the way to go.
Then what about next season? Season tickets? Are there different packages?
So for us, we have sort of 5 different subscription packages you can look at. We have a full series subscription, which gives you 1 ticket to all 10 concerts that we do. And then you can look at a subscription for our 5 symphonic concerts or our 5 pops concerts. And then we have 2 sort of customizable options. One's called a compose your own, where if you know you're going to travel a lot, you're allowed to pick from the pops and the symphonic. So you could pick the movie concert, a big Grammy-winning soloist, and then maybe the holiday pops.
And you would pick how many in the package, like 5 or 3?
There are 5 in that package,
5 in that
exactly.
package, okay.
And then we have something that's called a Flex 4, which is pretty much like a punch card that gives you the ability to get 4 tickets however you want. So you pay for this punch card, and you can show up to the office and say you want to redeem it for 2 tickets to this concert and 2 tickets to that concert. So it's sort of every option from 10 concerts down to 4.
Okay, anything you would like to talk about that I have not brought up?
I think that was good for that part.
Okay, well, full house every time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thanks
Definitely.
much.
Thank you.
Take care, and we're off.
Thank you for watching Amazing Grace. We are an all-volunteer organisation and are always looking for people to help us produce interesting programmes.